Reframing Mindset podcast. We are clear my head of the thoughts that are preventing clarity, practice my speech, among other things. Episodes range from informative knowledge to funny stories about my experiences, and in the future, maybe include interviews. So subscribe and enjoy. Episodes drop every other day. Welcome back to Reframe Mindset podcast. My name is Constant, and this episode is basically the episode. Uh, this episode is basically what I call it. So Vybes Kartel versus Alkaline and something like that. And why this episode is relevant? Because coming up, coming up, I started the podcast now, and you never know, like maybe next year or so, you'll be like 6 years I'm out there so doing this podcast and things. So in these low times, what happens is that you and that's the funny thing when I talk about you're not actually listening to podcasts. You see, you start living this stuff that you out there so listening to. So you listen to some artists and then eventually you out there so start living the experience. And what happens when you start to live the experience, like you understand the mindset or what they were going through at the time. So you'll be like, it's so negative. Or you'll be like, but then you actually reach a point and be like, yeah, no, it actually makes sense. That's so why you actually have to do that now. And so what happens is that during those times now, so you have like, so where I'm from, you have the great Vybes Kartel or stuff like that. That, when I was growing up, that was who got me that, you actually listening to Earth Emergency and stuff like that. Back in those days. That was the thing that, Vybes Kartel was the thing, When I go into high school now, you actually realize actually go my home, my type of home. When I reach high school now, it was actually singing a different kind of song. Different kind of song. Or maybe it was actually singing the same song, but what happened is that I saw him on TV, so it was more clean about then. It was actually more clean about then. So it was actually being that person, but it was more cleaner. It changed up his stuff to try to make money. And that's the funny thing about this stuff, about the podcast and things. Because you see me work out video now, it's actually a big upgrade. It's actually a big upgrade. You see the podcast shirt and stuff like that. I guess I have to fix up the shirt. One day I actually see how it's perfect and stuff like that. But this is actually a big upgrade coming where I'm from and stuff like that. It's actually a great well for me. It's actually a big upgrade and stuff like that. You see this episode, but in reality, I'm doing other stuff. And one of the funny thing about it is that the reason why I'm recording this episode and stuff is because I said, it's a big upgrade where I'm from, but in reality, I have to do other stuff. So in reality, now, I actually have something that I want to plan today, so maybe go try to buy, and it would make sense to actually go early because this is early in the morning. So I will go there and say, okay, I'm gonna go there now and see I can go early. But one of the stuff that I wanted to buy is actually the place actually open uh late, maybe later in the day. But the funny thing is, it's summer. It's summer. So what happens is that through summer, maybe they would actually open early, but I don't really know the place like that to know that okay they would open early. So that's the funny thing about actually coming out of your poverty and stuff like that. You'll actually reach a point now where you have money and stuff like that. But to make you're not that rich in the sense that you can go because these purchases now are very big purchases where I put with that I can't put out in it and all these stuff. So it's like really big purchases. You can't just go out and just make those purchases like that. So, but it is one of those big investment. Be like, okay, if actually I do it right, and so everything that I was saying before would actually just kind of compound and make this stuff kind of work. better, but to actually do it in. But what happens now to actually execute it now, you actually see a very complex step where you be like, oh, okay, one of the stores that I would actually have to go through will maybe with the time that I actually decide that I want to go there, maybe we'll close, maybe we'll open. So maybe it would open now due to the time because it's summer, but I don't really know the store like that to say, okay, through it summer it will open like that. So that's the thing. That's the funny thing. I'll be like, so that's the funny thing. But because of that now you have me, it's just hey, I'm just pass the time and actually record over these episodes now and stuff. So what happened now? Say I have the Vybes Kartel and Alkaline. So I talk about the past. Okay, that's how I actually introduced to Vybes Kartel on the TV out there, so emergency and stuff like that. So boom in high school, if actually listen to it, I was introduced to him in a different way. He was actually introduced to us in a different way, which is basically um was introduced us in a more vulgar way and stuff like that. If you actually realize and I go to a university days or stuff like that, I guess it kind of makes sense as to why that vulgar way was actually somewhat necessary. But that's the funny thing. But what happens is that boom, by the time I actually reached the university, at my late high school days, he was in prison. He was in prison because all those vulgar ways and stuff like that actually come to an end. You can be out there so plain I am mighty, boom, real life, this very real life, boom, you go to jail and stuff like that. But that's a funny thing. Now he's out. Now he's out, and what happens is that now because now he's out. Um, when he was in jail, yeah, what happens now is that his influence back in his time kind of diminished, and somebody new come up. So those time I actually did really care about dancing like that. But what happens is that when I actually go to university, what happens is that basically, that is the culture. As you grow up in where I'm coming from, that is the culture. So I can't go away from it. So boom, that was the thing. So boom. But what happens now, boom, because he is in jail now, you have someone new now when I was actually coming through high school and stuff like that. You have alkaline that comes with a different thing and stuff like that. So what happens now in a different reality, I guess if you did go to jail and stuff like that, we're not with me, we would leave here after alkaline. But because they actually went there, you have the alkaline and stuff like that that actually came up and influence. But but what happened, I know you have two of them have a clash now. So every day because alkaline is the second runner up now. Every time a journalist coming like, oh my god, is why is cartel not acknowledging alkaline and alkaline not acknowledging vice cartel and stuff like that. And when they actually come to it and they reach far enough, you realize that it's for one. It actually we actually reach that's the funny thing about coming under poverty and stuff like that. You actually realize that and on both sides. So for one, if you actually a journalist, that's the funny thing about coming out of stuff like that. On the journalist side, you're gonna see that those questions are relevant if you're actually really a poor journalist. Like that's the funny thing about actually coming out of stuff where be like those we call gotcha questions and stuff like those stuff are actual legit strategy because this because the funny thing about the podcast, when I actually listen to the podcast, hear some episodes drop. And that's the funny thing. When you see me honest, living that, maybe living that rich podcast life, you're gonna maybe see some early episodes of some flop episodes. And be like, oh my god, this was what he was doing back then and stuff like that. And what happens that hey, those stuff were relevant because I was actually not living that life before. But funny enough, maybe the same thing for a journalist where we like, yo, yeah, some journalists, bro. When they actually come in, some very detailed, well thought out stuff like that. But when I actually go to adult world, just like with everything, I go to university, I learn about when you programming and stuff like that. And then boom, or learn my feed, then boom, when actually go to the real world, you have to do those stuff on a business cycle and stuff like that. Be clocking out all these stuff, ethics and all these stuff gone out the window. Ethics and everything gone out the window. So that's the funny thing about reaching the adult world where be like, yo, most of these can praise all almighty, but boom, have to get up, pay taxes, pay bills and all this stuff. So most of these ethics and everything gone out the window. I can't even have time to think. They don't have time to think. So yeah, so boom. So boom. So yes, a journalist usually come after they have these gotcha questions and stuff like that. And the funny thing about it is that we in a different reality. So you call those stuff gotcha questions on the journalist side, but on the artist side we call that now. And for the journalist side now, the other side of it to think about is 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 legit in the sense that on the artist side they actually come out of poverty as well. Because you actually there's some song they actually singing and stuff like that. Say for example if they were living a rich life, maybe they would actually do it because as Vybes Kartel was actually really rich compared to back. Because he was actually the top man. Now he's back up. You know, there's a clocking many dollars and all these stuff now. Clocking many dollars and Alkaline is all this. So still in second second place and all this stuff. Still in second place. And all these things. And um second place and all these things. So it's like yo, you can't we can saying oh the clocking in dollars. So yeah, he's rich and stuff like that. But what happens is that with Vybes Kartel is coming from where it comes from. So he is rich in our eyes, and that's the funny thing about actor community. So it's rich in, and that's the funny thing about Reframe Mindset podcast and stuff like that. Because it's rich in our eyes. Or, I go to high school and stuff like that, rich in our eyes, work and stuff like that. Yeah, man, and all these stuff. But boom, there's a reason why, boom, in where I'm from and stuff like that. Rich in our eyes and stuff like that. The first thing we actually come come out the first actor I do is try to get back his thing, fly out to the first workplace. Because what happens is that yeah, we're big on all these stuff. When the actor goes to the big league, the real place you realize that yo actually a small fish in a big pond. He's dominating Jamaica, bro. When actually go to be like, oh yo, he's really a small fish in a big pond. It's actually a small fish in a big pond. So that's the funny thing. So so he was out there so thinking, so he thinking in the future, future thinking and stuff like that. So while that's the funny thing about actor coming up and stuff like that. Every day I'm coming out and be like, oh my god, he's so but he's not as though as you think and stuff like that. He's actually really smart, so because when actually go you realize that yo, this stuff. That's the funny thing when we talk about episode value of a company's history. We be like, oh yo, when a company been around for a long time, they know what they're doing. Like yo, they he would always been behind bars for a while. He actually know that yo, this is actually some small compared to what's over there. But so funny enough, because he know that yo this is a small league compared to what's out there. But he's actually was doing is right, So he's actually coming out and doing is right in the sense that yo people always call him ask him walk and it's like oh this dismisses him and stuff like that. And he's right because yo he's actually way better than that in in the grander scheme. It's playing a bit differently. But because he's down and stuff like that. Because when he was actually going down, he was actually in his so people was trying to take him down and stuff like that. Oh, there are people like Alkaline that come in and rise up. Because while I hear me say Alkaline, you have 10 million people do it do what they're trying to take his title when he actually get it. But Alkaline coming in now after coming was undertaking the thing now. Because they always are taking his thing now, it's pushing it, pushing it and stuff. And I said these are the funny thing about this stuff. These are the stuff that actually was much advice time coming up with us. So that actually no, we actually out there. So yeah, this is what coming out past the time. This is what actually coming out past the time. So so Alkaline versus thing. So the reason for the podcast is the fact that people always come and ask Alkaline, yo, why aren't you influenced by Vybes Kartel and stuff like that? And it's like, yo, and he would dismiss it and stuff like that. And like, oh, yo. But in reality, when I actually think about it, yo, Vybes Kartel, he was the top person back then and stuff like that. And then because he was the top person, you know, he pushed the bar, he pushed the barrier, he pushed the barrier for that. And then boom, Alkaline coming now and out there so writing and stuff like that. So if you actually look at it and stuff like that, it's actually an Alkaline spot. It's actually that's the funny thing. You actually say he went to university. It actually when actually realize that it's actually kind of stupid. The more you actually say that, the more it's actually coming and be stupid to say, yo, you're not influenced by the person. Like, yo, this will be like, oh, yo, the person is actually, without him, you won't even reach the relevance of journalists even asking you that question. But in reality, if you actually listen to Vice Carter interview and stuff like that, you'd actually realize that Vice Cartel himself was introduced to the game, pushed into the game through someone else, Bounty Killer. Which back in my days as well, I usually see as well. But maybe I didn't really go into his song. Maybe it'd be like, oh, like these are the serious time. And it's not by Bounty Killer. Those are, I say, you try some stuff. But what happens is that I said we're now in 2025 now, so so back in my time growing up and stuff like that. And that's the funny thing about maybe being in a bubble and then pushing the bubble and then coming back and see you like, oh yeah, you're seeing it from a different lens. You're seeing it from a different lens. Just like you hear my voice, you hear the episode during my audio time now. Now you're actually seeing the video now. So you'll be like, oh, no, it's actually a different lens now. You actually see the podcast from now. It's actually a different thing to seeing the podcast from. So that's the funny thing about our clients. Yo, maybe he actually was a person out there, so be like, oh yo, we actually was interested in writing music and being a dancer artist from a long time and stuff like that. And maybe he wasn't really interested. He wasn't influenced by Alkaline by Vybes Kartel per se. But the thing is that it can't just like you can't go and not acknowledge that he's not here. That actually was the stupidity where we like, oh yeah, yeah, acknowledge that he's not there. Because what will happen is that every time you do that, you're gonna actually be that invisible barrier. But what happens is that because he's doing that, you realize that he's actually playing a small league. He's actually playing a really small league. And why Scott actually reached bigger in the sense that, yo, he actually, Vybes Kartel actually was out there touring and be like, because, yo, yeah, remember, so you have Bob Marley. So, yeah, I'm talking about Vybes Kartel now. But yeah, Bob Marley that's still in the grave, topping the charts, topping the charts and everything like that. Topping the charts. So um, so so Vybes Kartel know from yes, you barely seeing my face. I've actually maybe coming now and and I say, actually come out and make this stuff. Ah, yeah. So it's like the funny so Vybes Kartel, I say for Vybes Kartel you have Bob Marley that in the grave out there, so still tapping it and stuff like that. And why is that? Because boom, they have that thing they call success and planning. People out there, so they have Damian Marley and all these stuff family out there, so pushing the barrier, pushing the legacy, keeping his name alive and pushing it forward. But even though he's still pushing it forward and still carrying Jamaica relevance and stuff like that, I said we out there so maybe turning this year 2025. Let me see. You would be JA now coming August because it's summer now, July of 2025. Jamaica would be JAMA, Jamaica, Axamaica, bro. Jamaica, Jamaica, bro, Jamaica. Let me see, Jamaica age. Jamaica. Let me see. Uh, oh my god. Oh my god. On 2025 minus 1962. Yes, so Jamaica will actually become 60, maybe 63 this year. Mm. Yeah, actually, Jamaica will become 63 this year. So what will happen is that it actually realized listening to podcasts and stuff like that. God is a small, it's small, coming from far, small. So what we hear, Bob Marley running the thing now, but Vybes Kartel coming, was introduced to the game through another person, maybe one and stuff like that, and then boom, he took it off, took it to another level, Then he reached an obstacle because he was out there doing some work. Because I said, dancehall is more rebellious. And so I said, I learned this stuff now, but dancehall is more rebellious and stuff like that, more vulgar. And it was so vulgar that they would actually mention it more in. They would mention it in when I was learning music class back in my. But we technically wouldn't really learn it because it was such a vulgar music and rebellion, vulgar type of music and stuff like that. It's kind of different. So boom, yeah. So boom now, fast forward now. Yeah, the journalist. You reach Alkaline and Vice Carter. Vice Carter been in the big league since I was actually coming up listening. But you have Alkaline now that is actually rising up in the big leagues and due to the fact that then Bryce Carter was incarcerated for so long. He actually reached the big leagues more. Actually reached the big leagues more. And it's like, oh. So what happened now is that that's the funny thing about it as well. That those people, he as well isn't that. I said, whatever is that, I'm not stupid as well. Whatever I'm not stupid. So it's actually making sense as to why I was doing it and stuff like that. What from my eyes, bro, the thing about it is that the in the reality, you're seeing it from the third eye, outside person, from my perspective. It's actually wrong for him not to acknowledge. That's the funny thing. I will actually going to be so. It's funny. It's actually wrong for him not to acknowledge him. I kind of mentioned that sometime, but what happens is that the funny thing about it is that journalists come and ask those questions. Every day they come in and ask the same questions. And back to the first topic where I said because there's a coming out of poverty and so what happens is that each time And Vybes Kartel realized this when he actually come in. First thing he bring Kartel to jail is actually come out and get his papers in order to be out this tour flying out and all this stuff. And when he's flying out, because he realized that there's a bigger game than this. Jamaica is actually some small league compared to the real thing. Not to discredit Redeem, but there's actually way more out there. It's actually way more out there. This was actually some small league compared to the real thing. There's actually way more stuff. Oh, up in the other place. And mm, so be- because of that, um, you you have you call it so yeah, so I said Alkaline is not that bad as well. So it's not acknowledging. What happens is that in the looking at from the third eye view, you realize that you see that you can't not acknowledge it. You cannot acknowledge the fact that he was there. He pushed it forward. Vice Carter was introduced, he pushed it forward, and then because of his downfall and stuff like that, even though are his impending downfall, because people will say, okay, maybe Alkaline was actually doing this stuff. Because I said, I wasn't really into dance that much growing up or anything like that. Growing up, people actually do dance all a lot. So, and what happens is that if you actually look at a bird's eye view, those stuff are what brings currency to GE. So what will happen is that the funny thing about actors stuff like that, you don't actually realize most of these stuff you just like you're growing up in my where I'm from and then boom going to another country is the goal and stuff like that. And then boom you go there and be like, oh yeah, people in that country be like, oh yeah, it's just a basic. It does the basic, bro. It doesn't like people that oh I dream to go to Paris. But Paris people will be like, oh yeah, bro, this is our normal day. This is our normal day in Paris, bro. This actually the normal day. So um so what will happen is that that is the thing that brings us us big dollars. One of the things that brings us big dollars. So we're coming up now in the adult world now. This was the thing I've been like, oh, passing the time during my low days without light and and all this stuff. Low days without light, fighting all these stuff. It's like, oh, So, so what will happen is that maybe you never hear me talk about in the future, but what will happen is that my coming up, these are stuff that actually maybe past my time, and if me not acknowledging those stuff, will be like, oh, when you see me in the big leagues. Be like, oh, what you actually did is small league. I'm like, bro, it was actually a thing that I was passing my time, somewhat keeping my sanity in my four ideas that was coming up. So, so what I was saying, so back to the main thing is that, so boom, what happened is that when Alkaline was during my time coming up and dancer was the thing, dancer is the thing now. Very call it when Vybes Kartel was free, maybe Alkaline was still dominate, would still be out there coming up and being a big second. Because I don't remember when he actually got incarcerated. During my late high school days, Vybes Kartel got incarcerated. Big time. Because I think he almost did more than one, but this was a big one where he got life imprisonment and stuff like that. Big one, big one. So during those time now, when I actually was seeing it, Arc, maybe Alkaline was still coming up those times. But if you actually look on the trajectory of maybe history and stuff like that, due to the type of music, what um Vybes Kartel was doing, he was actually putting himself in those harm's way of the jail cell from long time. So when he actually come in and get that demands, it was maybe a self inflicted injury. But as self but that's the funny thing about it. Actually, you see, I would be a fan from back in the emergency times, back in those times. But when I actually growing up the way I grew up, when I actually hear the other type of music, the more vulgar music, was less of a fun. It was actually not the thing in my home. I can't go to listen to those stuff in my home. Where I'm coming up in my home, so the more vulgar. Um, Vibes Kartel. But so um, so the so what will happen is now is that Alkaline coming up now, and then he was on the rise to still be in the second place. I mean, to overtake Cartel and stuff like that. He is coming down, and he's still the second big thing, pushing it and pushing it, but you have to realize that perspective experience stuff like that. He's the biggest thing now for the gen of people, new gen of people. But now Vice Cartels coming out and stuff like that is actually clocking up those dollars, the big league dollars, because of things that he's from a different generation. So now Alkaline is dominating the new school, the new school stuff like that. Carter can come in and maybe clock in some new school stuff like that. But just like, for example, boom, I passed my high school days, university days, now I'm still adult now, is supposed to be going out and clocking and making dollars and stuff like that. um, our clients' audience is a different audience than Carter. So Carter can come in and get some of our client audience because he's way bigger and all these stuff in those time, clocking and all those stuff. But Alkaline, the main thing is that Alkaline audience is a different audience, maybe a more younger, more fresher audience and stuff like that. So fresher, different audience, Mhm. different audience. So and just like boom, because it's a different audience now. Know that Alkaline is out here second now. Boom, it's a new thing now. So there's someone there now at the bottom under Alkaline now trying to take Alkaline space and stuff like that. So what happens that it's a new generation again. New generation again. Mm. New generation again. So it's like, we but and what will happen is that coming up when that person trying to take alkaline space now reach the big leagues now and take it now, it's gonna be like you going to go, oh you did acknowledge stuff like that. It's like it's wrong to out there to not acknowledge alkaline when he actually reach the big leagues and be like, if he does acknowledge alkaline, be like, oh yo, you actually what they said. You can't be in dancehall. You can't be in dancehall and not acknowledge Alkaline. Advice card. It's like yo, yes, so come here and it's like what it's a different genre out there so doing. Like you're not doing dance. It's like, oh you actually meet that so that's the next thing we actually come in and see when you actually go out and you say is a um say, for example, you out there so making music and stuff like that. Either you build your own genre, and when people come and talking about, oh, no, I'm not a dancer artist, bro. I'm out there so in my own genre. When you out there so being like, so once you actually say you're a dancer artist, you have to actually acknowledge the history. Bro. You actually have to go out and start acknowledge the history and be like, oh, yo, without them, without Vybes Kartel and stuff like that, when you actually alkaline wouldn't maybe not even have a record. a microphone to even record the record the song. So, but because of Vybes Kartel now, you have a microphone to record a song now. So when you record a song now, it's actually for a new audience now. You can actually do more. So and then boom, you have things like new rules concern and you have new rules concern. So because of him now in doing that now, you have a new and he bring up new artists now, and he's in the big league, in big leagues in way now. You have new artists now coming up. You have a new artist now coming up. Try to take Alkaline spot now that have more than they call it more than more than a microphone now because of Vybes Kartel now you have Alkaline now start to think about as these are scenarios that I don't know actually think they come because Alkaline now Vybes Kartel you see Alkaline start up with a microphone and maybe some stuff manager and stuff like that. Boom, you push it now. So a new artist now start out with way more than that. Because that's Vybes Kartel to record most than phone and so. So boom, you see now you see a new artist coming up now. They start out with microphone, Pro Tools, Apple Mac. Apple Mac. That's only Apple Mac. The artists are starting out with American visas, flying out and all these. Starting out with all those stuff and all these things. So boom, the new generation now will come out and actually come out and taking over all those clocking in big dollar can actually clock in way more dollars tenfold than the generation. Yeah, but what happens is that um in reality, yeah, as a journalist come out, say the same question. Like, when they come out and reach the big leagues, they'll be like, "Oh, yo, reach the big leagues." Just like, and that's the funny thing when they actually come in and they clocking the big dollars. When they actually come in and actually reach the big leagues, because you don't necessarily reach that and stuff like that, and then the new person trying to take alkaline space, just like the same thing Vybes Kartel. You can realize that yo, boom, small dollars the boss, it's a clocking in his time when the new person come in. I say like it's not no small dollars the boss that clocking in those times, and there's a compound. So what happens now? Yeah, is you hear me calling doing the we call it reaching the big leagues, and then hear me they calling the stupid questions. The journalists ask the stupid gotcha questions. No, that um what you call gatekeepers. No, the journalists now gonna come and just ask those same they call it stupid questions. No, to the new upcoming artists because what happens now, we actually be a new journalist now. That's the funny thing about actually becoming mainstream, mainstream and stuff like that. After become mainstream, you're gonna realize that to ask all those unique questions and things like that's actually really hard. Is really hard and stuff like that. Stuff like it's hard to do this stuff manually. It's because that's the fun thing about the podcast episode. You see me out to listen to the podcast for your entertainment, but in real life, I have to feed myself. I wake up early and eat and stuff like that. I have to feed myself. Or in reality, actually, I cut my the big leagues out there, so they always cut and all these stuff. So I have to spend money to do those stuff and all these. These things ain't cheap. So when if you actually come out now and see, for example, Alkaline and stuff like these early days, boom, you see me podcast, maybe in my later years, see you it's always sharp. Then gonna go back, journalists now gonna go back in the X Files and be like, oh yo, look at you back in the days and all these stuff. What will happen is that in reality, just like this stuff, we're always trying to prove the concept. These stuff they making us big dollars back then. So by the time the journalists come and find us, we all this actually coming out and making big dollars. So mm, because the big dollars coming out, that is their way of coming up. That was their actual way of coming up. Finding all these simple videos and be like, oh yo, this is the thing now, why this and that and that. But what happens is that these stuff are revolutionary. These stuff are actually revolutionary things in its early stages. But when it becomes mainstream now and we can be like, oh yo, um, why all this doing this and stuff like that, be like, oh yo, you don't realize that brother. These were early progresses that we actually needed to actually reach this level. These were the wins. These were the wins that we actually need to clock in and stuff. So you see me also recording videos normally and all these stuff. Be like, oh yeah, these were actually these stuff isn't as easy. Maybe you see me also monetize and clock it in dollars in the future. And it's like, oh yo, these stuff wasn't easy. These, so that's the funny thing about these. Those stuff were actually was easy. So what will happen is that boom, the new artist trying to take Alkaline place now, you're gonna realize that boom, the journalist can come and ask him somewhat similar question. And so even if the journal people listening will be like, oh, I'm never gonna be that and stuff like when actually reach that level, you're gonna realize that you're gonna reach that first because what happens that you actually become the corporate first. You're gonna realize that protocols have to be followed and those are the gotcha questions and stuff like that because what happens if you don't do those questions, boom bang quick, you're not gonna make those dollars. You're not gonna make those dollars. And you're going to have to actually do that to make those dollars to make your ends meet until you can actually reach the point where you can go and do this stuff the way you want. So that's the funny thing about coming up and seeing the big leagues and bigger leagues and stuff like that. Both of them is not wrong in what they see. So when journalists coming out and ask Alkaline, like, oh, why you don't do cartel and stuff like that, yo. And Alkaline said, yo, we don't. Even though people that be like, yo, you know, this and that, yo, he is not wrong. Just like Vybes Kartel is not wrong. Because what they're playing a different league. Each day they come out, they're playing a different league. But in reality, it's actually not. It's stupid. It's stupid. Like, what happened is that, say, for example, he was that was actually real. So Alkaline actually say, oh, he didn't care. He didn't influence Vybes Kartel. Didn't influence Alkaline at all. What will happen is that he'll be out there writing song in a bubble. He'll be writing song in a bubble. And dancer would be just like boom back in the days of before 1834 record the new thing record related to episode record segregation or stuff. We'll be like, oh, one of the things that happen is that boom, you feel big in one area. So what happens is that it's a listening podcast. And that's the funny thing about this podcast as well. You have my loyal person that was listening and be like, oh yeah, thank you for the loyal person listening. And be like, oh yo, oh my god, free my podcast, bro, is the best thing on God's given earth and all these stuff. Then you go out and oh my god, bro, is the best thing, and then be like, oh yo, I do a search, Google boom boom, how many I do a search how many podcasts. I do a search or stuff like that. And maybe it'd be like, oh yo, um, let me see. R oh dear. And then you actually do it and realize that they have brought 3.5 million to 4.52 million podcasts. There's actually that read that amount. So Yo, so um, there's that amount of podcasts out there. So to reach the highest out of that is hard work, hard work, hard work. So the funny thing is, for every Vybes Kartel and Alkaline success that we always praising, you have Alkaline, you have Vybes Kartel, you have things like Movado. We have people like Movado during this time that Alkaline actually acknowledge Movado more than Vybes Kartel. And so, but what happens that in reality, Vybes Kartel was the big person. But what happens that Movado was a great contender. He had some other people back in his time. It was a great contender, but yo, Vybes Kartel is the man during his era. Just like in Alkaline era when I was coming up, you have people like Gage and all these party. Maybe family come from his era as well. And then what happened though is that Alkaline get asked about Gage. Man is like, who is a Gage and stuff like that. And what happens is that you will say that funnily, but in reality, he could actually be saying that would actually be true. Where be like, oh, who is actually a Gage? Like, yo, because what happens that you see me on a record a podcast and be like, oh, yo, I will come out and be like, oh, so you heard about this podcast? And I'll be like, oh, yo, what is that podcast? I would act like what, and generally, and not be uh uh this or stuff like that, but it'd be like maybe when they actually become a player in the game, when they actually become a player in the game, and you know they're trying to do this stuff for money, you don't even, sometimes you believe have time to even listen to the other stuff, because I said this is real, the real story, the real life. When I actually go out to find food, eat in days when this stuff is not monetized, I have to find you find food, eat, you have to find a job and stuff like that. I have to find me I money to shape up here and all these stuff and everything like that. Find money to do this shirt, find money to do the shirt, every single thing else. So, and your time coming up, you barely have time when you actually start making waves. You're gonna realize that sometimes you barely have time to come out and start think about the other person. Think about the other person. So with the, so so that's the funny thing, because you're just making waves, you're just pushing the boundary, you're pushing the boundary. But you're back to, I was actually listening to doing the watching the stuff on my way out of coming out, maybe in the basement and stuff like that, watching the politics stuff. And what happens, the person I was out there so rooting for, he out there so making big waves, and making big waves coming up. But when the actual results came out, the person come out and get like 4% or stuff like that. And that's the funny thing about the election thing, where it be like, oh yo, the, the funny thing about living in a bubble, you feel like you're also doing stuff. You feel like you're also doing stuff and things like that. And then when the actual results come out, people like, oh yo, we didn't heard of you, we're doing this and stuff like that. Boom. So boom, you're just making big waves and stuff like that, portraying. And be like, in reality, you're just is a small fry. Small fry. When the results come out, the results come out. Like you're just building this big wave. But when the election start now, boom, you see the person drop out. You see the person drop out, they barely have money, it's like, oh, bro, we spend all this money trying to support you to get you to the big stage because we believe in you, and then drop out the first second. It's like, yeah, cause what happens is that when the actor reach the big leagues, when the actor reach the big leagues, you find what is called the pod at me, where we like, oh, I heard of Vybes Kartel through. You have a person like me, that's heard Vybes Kartel through TV back in my younger years. So I would actually be tendency, 10, more 10 than if I were to do dance class. Tendency to know Vybes Kartel more than, for example, Alkaline or something. Like, oh, yo, you know, I would actually go out and be like, oh, yo, Alkaline would be a very good artist and stuff like that. But hey, I grew up during Vybes Kartel era and stuff. So if you were insulated going up and driving around get drive school, you only hear it. But during my time in high school days, I hear that 24/7. So so it's hard to not see. I did not hear about Vybes Kartel. What happens is that because high school people now let me hear about Alkaline now, and then during my time of poverty, I got more into the dancehall space again, and then see Alkaline. And be like, oh yeah, he's a big second and stuff like that. But he's a different, he's new, he's different. He's can bring a different thing to a game and stuff like that. But um, Vybes Kartel now will be like, yo, the Godfather. No, it'll be like, oh, yo, he's the push old head now, breaking the chains. They're breaking the chains, and or you'll be like, oh, yeah, he is the front. He is the person to making the big dollars. He is the one to beat. I think. Yeah, he is the one to beat. Not beating him is the thing. So boom, and then on Vice Cartel part now, what he sees now is like, yo, every time I leave the country, maybe every time I leave the country, everywhere I go, it's just Bob Marley, bro. How the hell is person in the grave and all this stuff, and still all this top in the charts. I can only top it for like a couple seconds, and then boom, Bob Marley back in the thing and stuff like that. So that is actually Vice Cartel's rule where it be like, oh yo, I am the top of the song now, but yo, now actually look at it now. I can only top it for like, even though I'm free and stuff like that, I can only top it for like a couple seconds, then boom, Bob Marley or is taking over again and stuff like that. So now he have to go back to the drawing board and stuff like that. So differently, different. So mm, and then boom, when you actually go to America and stuff like that. Because boom, you have artists when they actually go to prison and stuff like that. And they're actually pushing out doing vice versa here that actually going out, flying out and all this stuff. And then boom, change the whole thing and stuff like that. Get caught up in the record, the stuff, the stuff. The first world stuff, the first world things, the first world things. When they actually reach that part, they reach the first world stuff. And I ain't gonna realize, and they realize, and that was an indication to say, yo, when they actually reach those levels, it's a different league. Because for my, here in Vybes Kartel and stuff like that, during my CVM and TVJ era, um, and then you have people like Spice. Now, in 2025 now, or early 2025, just leave the university now. Spice, before when it was released, Vybes Kartel, Spice was hunting that BET is the thing growing up in a bro. When I growing up here, being on BET is the thing. So what happens now? Boom. Yeah, I mean, now in 2025, that is maybe working and stuff like that, maybe we can go out and maybe upgrade to the highest cable plan. And what will happen is that for a household now that can upgrade to the highest cable plan and stuff like that. Watching BET isn't really really that much anymore and stuff like that. Be like, oh yo, it's just a normal thing now. BET is a thing now, and then you have my views where be like, oh, I can look at it objectively and be like, oh yeah, okay, yeah, she's out this, she's out in a pondering because you know this on a bigger stage. She's out this on a bigger stage. But then you have somebody coming from poverty now, just like me podcast. So I see my face, be like, oh yo, um, BET is like is like Disney Channel. Like just got cable for the first time. Now. It's just like Disney Channel and Nickelodeon and stuff like that. But what happens that during my time, just before so that yo, when I reach out, like, we didn't change or anything like that. No. We just somewhat getting the ability to reinvest in what we love most. So reinvest in what we love most. So if you're a person out there to love um spice or stuff like that, you would actually go to BT and everything, the cable and stuff like that. You will go and be like, oh yo, BT is the must have, or whatever station she's on is the must have. And when I actually get stuff like that and things, I need to watch this stuff and stuff. But if you're actually coming out of poverty and all these things, you don't have that luxury of choice. You don't maybe have that luxury of choice. The only luxury of choice will be like, oh yo, we need internet and we need someone cable, or we can afford cable and internet and stuff like that. So those are suffice, and then boom, I see with and stuff like that. Oh yo, you know, introduced to him, but I said differently. So when actually see Vybes Kartel is the top and all these stuff, but it's a different league, different league. Just like I maybe doing the video podcast now more consistently, actually me reach a different league in the podcasting world, bro. Getting different stuff, and the more I actually go and do this stuff, the more it becomes better. But a different league, ah, it's it's a different league from yeah, from the top. It's a different league from the top, and the more you actually reach, the more you have to actually do a different things. The more you have to do different things, and yeah. So that's that's a funny. So that's basically for this episode. That's basically for this episode. With Alkaline Vybes Kartel. Growing up, I actually see those. You just see the comparison, the comparison of those two artists. But in reality, I grew up and see Vybes Kartel. And yeah, even those days, you have things that I know in my older years, I guess maybe I could actually go and see more of these stuff. But because he always doing those stuff, brother, I can never talk that. I can never talk that. But because he did that now, someone like Alkaline now can come out and get us a start and push the boundaries. And because he was incarcerated, he actually go out and do a lot of higher boundaries and stuff like that. Now that it's out, you actually see the reality now. You actually come out and see reality now. All this I talk about networking, all vast cartel connection and stuff like that. As soon as he break free, and not only that, because the audience was so influential, only he could do a thing where he could actually go in and actually break free from what will be a life sentence. Given that different situation now in that coming alkaline generation now. Say for example, alkaline generation. Say for example, Vybes Kartel never go out. I never got to jail. Never did they go to jail. And then you have someone like Alkaline come up now and then boom, Alkaline get come and get a sentence and stuff like that. And Vybes Kartel did they go to jail and stuff like that. I get 10 times not 1% Alkaline couldn't even break that. You would be like one of those rappers that you hear that go boom and go to jail and stuff like you would like those rappers ain't Eminem. Those rappers ain't Eminem that can go if Eminem will go suit and stuff can go out and sing about all these stuff. Once Alkaline go out and get that case and get that life sentence, boom, his career is done. You have the little lawyer from this. So and be like, oh yo. But what will happen actually in reality is that people would move on, just like Carter did. People actually move on with their lives and stuff like that. But because move on with their lives, but was still silent supporting him, but he was actually releasing some stuff from where he was. But Alkaline now, if you actually was doing reach that level, go on sentence, and Vybes Kartel was free. That's the key thing. Like, Alkaline was going and get the life sentence, and Vybes Kartel was free. All this are doing his thing and all these songs, topping the charts. Alkaline career would be end. Like, he couldn't do that thing because the life sentence is something is actually hard to break. It takes big dollars to go and actually come out and fight that case. So you can't Alkaline career would end his whole life. His own one of his own songs that he actually sing would be in that case would be his downfall. It'd be like, oh yo, when I song is speak, you must ricochet or something like that. He shoot the fire and the ricochet I hit him. He shoot the shot and the ricochet I hit him. And that would actually be Alkaline. It'd be like, oh yo, he would actually be like one of those rappers that is in like imprisonment and you have the little fun. That's the fun. That's the reason why I say yo, Vybes Kartel is smart in the sense that he know that this stuff is actually a bigger league. Just like I'm saying, bro, I'm a big Jeezy fan and stuff like that. But for me, Jeezy fan, you have Drake and every no matter how and that's the funny thing about actual reality and stuff like that. No matter how much I would say yo I'm a Jeezy fan and stuff like that. You go out and in the real world, Drake, 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 and it's like, oh, you realize that, oh yeah, people don't have every like when I hear the Drake is that we can't neglect the fact, you know. But it's like, oh, you have to realize is that um those like those are the things. Just like when you see Apple, be like, oh yeah, they came in another phone, Apple, 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 iPad, iPhone, and all these stuff, the simple stuff. Go to the iPhone 11. Why is that? Why is that? The character iPhone person don't, they can look. What happens that iPhone is more, they can go here and be like, oh, yo, I want a phone that does this, I want and stuff like that. They can do those stuff. And it's like, iPhone can do this, but um, you know, that there's Samsung and all these stuff. It's just like, they just go out and be like, oh yeah, Apple is this thing. Apple is this thing. That is the thing to be and all this. So what happens is that if if it was free, Alkaline was free, if Alkaline got sentenced and Vybes Kartel was free, no charges or anything like that, he would be like one of those rappers that he would be like, what could have been? He would be like, Alkaline could have been one of the big ones, bro. But now he's in jail and he's like Ricochet. Ricochet. And it could be one of the big thing, but Ricochet and it's like, oh yeah. Yeah. So that's basically for this episode. Thank you for listening and just look for the next episode. Mhm.
Well, this is the end of the episode. Thanks for watching and look forward for the next episode. To support this podcast, go to anchor.fm/cssb/support or become a sponsor for this episode. If you have a product that you want to have more exposure, DM me on the Instagram page, Reframing Mindset Podcast, or on Twitter at ReframingP. Either way would help. Thank you regardless for listening, and here's a preview for the next episode.